Nonviolence is the answer to the crucial political and moral questions of our time. The need for man to overcome oppression and violence without resorting to oppression and violence. Man must evolve for all human conflict, a method which rejects revenge, aggression, and retaliation. The foundation of such method is love. Martin Luther King, 1964.
Today is the day in the United States that we commemorate the life of Martin Luther King Jr. The opening quotation you heard was from a speech King gave in December of 1964 while in Stockholm, Sweden, accepting the Nobel Peace Prize. When you think of King, you should think of the idea of non-violence resistance. During the great struggle for civil rights, it was King who advocated the application of Gandhi's principle of non-violent resistance to unjust laws. Gandhi was a famous Indian leader who had been influenced by the writings of Henry David Thoreau, an American philosopher who lived in the 19th century.
Mahatma Gandhi has done more than any other person of history to reveal that social problems can be solved without resorting to primitive methods of violence. In this sense, he is more than a saint of India. He belongs to, as they said of Abraham Lincoln, to the ages. Martin Luther King, 1958.
King was born on January 15, 1929 in Atlanta, Georgia. He first came to national attention when he was only 26 years old in 1955 with his involvement in the Montgomery bus boycott. 13 years later, in April of 1968, he was murdered at the age of 39 while in Memphis, Tennessee. In 1983, Congress passed and President Reagan signed a law commemorating this day as a national holiday. Though the action was controversial, many opposed the King holiday. The day has become a powerful yearly reminder of King's life and legacy.
King's position in history was complex. His message of nonviolence was not universally accepted by people of color. Many who had experienced oppression at the hands of white people thought King was too soft, too passive. They wanted change now. This became one of King's greatest challenges. That challenge continues even today. As King himself said, "We must combine the toughness of the serpent and the softness of the dove, a tough mind and a tender heart."
Darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. Hate multiplies hate, violence multiplies violence, and toughness multiplies toughness in a descending spiral of destruction. The chain reaction of evil, hate begetting hate, for wars producing more wars, must be broken, or we shall be plunged into the dark abyss of annihilation. Martin Luther King, 1963.
Those words come from something King wrote in 1963, the same year he gave his most famous speech. We aren't celebrating Martin Luther King today because he was black. We're celebrating him because he stood for a principle that is central to the idea of America, that all people, regardless of color or background, will be treated with respect, that they will be judged by the content of their character. Every time you treat a classmate or teacher or person who waits on you at a restaurant or anyone you come in contact with in a respectful way, you are honoring that principle that King was preaching. It's about tolerance of others.
A nation that continues year after year to spend more money on military defense than on programs of social uplift is approaching spiritual death. Martin Luther King, 1967.
In 1967, Martin Luther King made an important and revolutionary decision. He decided to speak out against the war in Vietnam. He saw the war and the destruction it brought as a waste of resources that could be used for the betterment of society. In 2017, it is important for us to remember that King's message of nonviolence was also strongly connected to a powerful anti-war message. His words and his actions continue to challenge us. What kind of society do we want in America?
You must be the change you wish to see in the world. That statement comes from Mahatma Gandhi, and it embodies the message of King. If you want things to change, it has to start with us. Martin Luther King was murdered 48 years ago, but his memory remains and his message is timeless. The ugliness of racism comes in all colors, and we certainly deal with issues of race within our own community. We don't have to look very far to see it. Racism, unfortunately, is a human condition. No one group has a monopoly on it. It affects us all. A wise person once told me that racism is based almost entirely on fear. Fear of differences, fear of the unknown, fear of what we do not understand. The best way to fight racism is to refuse to accept it in ourselves or in others. That is our responsibility. The best way to fight racism and teach tolerance of others is through education. to build communities of respect one brick at a time, to eliminate irrational fears and resentments that serve only to destroy. One person cannot solve the deep problem of racism, but one person can control his or her attitude concerning race. King said this about the role of education in our lives. The function of education is to teach one to think intensively and to think critically. Intelligence plus character, that is the goal of true education. That is a message worth hearing every day. On behalf of the Student Senate, thanks for listening, and take some time this day to reflect on the life and legacy of Martin Luther King.